And this is a logbook. Aviator logbooks are like flying diaries. They document an aviator's flights throughout his career, and that belongs to Marion, who was the first Marine fighter ace of World War II.
Wow.
Received 2 Navy Crosses. And the page I have it open to is August of 1942. And it covers some of his combat time at Guadalcanal. And you can just see the intense combat action. He was shot down himself. He shot down Japanese aircraft. But what's really unique about it is you'll notice there are initials, JTS, that are next to some of his write-ups, which are certifying that what he is writing is accurate. And JTS was his squadron commander, Major John Smith, who was a Medal of Honor recipient. So you have the first Marine fighter ace and the initials of an MOH there. So that is a pretty cool artifact.
Wow.
And the Doolittle Raid is, a lot of people will come into the museum and they'll say, why do you have a B-25 in here? And of course the Doolittle Raiders and launching the B-25s from USS Hornet. Well, they needed to have somebody train them in how to take off from a short distance. So what I'd like to tell the flight students and tours when they come in, when that happened, you had to have a special relationship, because Jimmy Doolittle at the time was one of the most acclaimed pilots in the world. He had a doctorate in aeronautics from MIT. He had patents to his credit. He'd done work in blind flying, instrument flying. He's a champion air racing pilot. There's very little he didn't know how to do in an airplane, but he didn't know how to take off in a short distance. So the Navy grabbed a flight instructor, called him in, said, hey, go down to Eglin Field, now Eglin Air Force Base. You'll find out what you're going to do when you get there. So Lieutenant Henry Miller heads down there, and there he is face to face with Jimmy Doolittle. So what I like to tell people is, imagine for that process, that operation to have worked, Jimmy Doolittle had to have humility. He had to be able to look at this young lieutenant and not be somebody that said, you know, I know everything. He's inexperienced. I'm more experienced. He had to be willing to be taught, in essence. And that flight instructor had to have the confidence to be able to tell somebody he probably looked up to growing up, you're not doing that correctly. And so it was that relationship, the fact that they got off on that footing, helped to make that operation successful. But Lieutenant Miller became Rear Admiral Miller, and before he died, we have pictures in our museum archives, he's visiting, and he dropped off some of the stuff he had assembled from his time training the Doolittle Raiders. So there's some handwritten notes there where he's charting how the Raiders are doing. There's a signed letter from Jimmy Doolittle thanking him and expressing his appreciation. And then there are a copy of his orders.
First lieutenant.
Right. Not quite sure the Navy rank structure back then. But those are his orders. He got $6 a per diem back then. And the orders were issued by A.C. Reed, who was the commander of the NC-4 flying boat, first aircraft to fly across the Atlantic, which we have here in the museum.
Wow.
And on a personal note, A.C. Reed is the captain. He was the CO of the base who presented my grandfather his wings of gold when he got them here in 1941.
That's special.
Yeah, and I later went on to find out that Lieutenant Miller, when he became a Rear Admiral, he was the one who called John McCain's family, his dad and his mom, to let him know that he'd been shot down over Vietnam. So there's all sorts of connections in naval aviation.
You never know.
You never know.
Just never know.